What's up everybody, it's Matt from Peter Glenn, and in this video we're going to show you how to mount a set of bindings on the old Burton 3D pattern. Let's check this out. So before Burton had the channel system on the majority of their boards, they had what was called the 3D pattern. It's basically a whole pattern with 3 screws in a triangular shape that pretty much mounts exactly like a 4x4 or 4x2. You're still using a disc with the teeth. You're adjusting the binding around the disc and then tightening down those screws to lock it down. And we do call this the old system, and you still are gonna see it on a few Burton boards, but it's mainly just the basic kids boards. Even those mid-range to high-end kids boards do have the channel nowadays. So this video is really just for those people that are buying a new set of bindings and they want to mount it on an older board. But right off the bat, before you even mount the bindings, we want to make sure that the bindings you're getting are 3D compatible. So the easiest way is to grab yourself a pair of Burton reflex bindings. So these bindings do come with a uni disc that will mount on channel and 4x4 because that's the majority of the boards nowadays. But the 3D discs are available either from the retailer that you buy it from or directly from Burton, and you can get them free of cost when you do buy a new set of bindings. But the reason they don't include them with the bindings anymore because they don't want to have a disc that's probably going to end up being thrown away. It just ends up being a waste of time and a waste of materials and a bunch of plastics that are going to end up in a landfill. But if you are looking at bindings that are not the Burton Reflex bindings and they're from another company, there are some still out there that do have the 3D compatible discs, but it seems to be a little less every single year just because the majority of the boards that are on the hill are going to be 4x4 or they're going to be channel. So again, if you are buying a brand new binding that is not Burton, you want to make sure that 100% they have a disc that is 3D compatible. And the reason for that is that when you look at that 4x4 pattern, it looks like it might match up, but it doesn't. And you're gonna end up ruining your board, ruining your bindings. And most importantly, you're gonna end up voiding the warranty on your board and your bindings because you don't have it mounted properly. Now, the best way to kind of show this is if you look at this disc and you see these outer slots, these are for the 4x4 and for the 3D. Now, if you look at these slots over here, these two are for the 4x4, but this one right here is for the 3D. These two holes are for the channel, so we're gonna go ahead and ignore those. But if we look at these two, you'll notice that this center slot for the 3D, it's not in line with the 4x4. It's shifted back a little bit. So if you take a 4x4 disc and you set it on here, you can get to a point where you're looking and you can kind of get maybe very, very close to the point where it looks like it's gonna line up. But the problem is if you try to run screws into those 3 holes, you're gonna end up stripping your screws and or stripping out your inserts, making it impossible to mount a binding in those holes. And the other thing that you might look at is you might say, oh, I just see 2 holes that line up. I'm just gonna mount the binding with 2 screws. And yes, the Burton EST bindings, they only mount with 2 screws. But with the disc, if you do mount with 2 screws inside the binding, the disc is not designed to hold the pressure all on one side of it. You want to have that pressure distributed evenly amongst the disc and amongst the binding. So when you are leaning forward and backward from toe to heel, and you're leaning from side to side towards the nose and tail of the board, we want to make sure that no matter which way you're pushing, the pressure is distributed evenly amongst that disc. So that's why it's super important that if you do have a board with the 3D pattern, that you don't try to fudge a 4-hole disc. We want to have this disc that does allow all 3 screws to go in nice and easy and to mount perfectly to the board. So once we know we've got bindings that are compatible with the 3D, the next step is to get them mounted. So getting them mounted is exactly the same as the 4x4 when it comes to putting the screws in, getting them started, and cranking them down. Again, we'll leave a link down in the description below to that if you've got any questions. But the main thing you need to know about the 3D hole pattern is adjusting side to side and adjusting forward and backward. With the 4x4 disc, a lot of times you can take the binding and you can adjust the binding side to side with those slots. Also, if your binding has a fixed heel loop, you can turn it this way and adjust it forward and backward to help center up your foot. With the 3D pattern, you're always going to be adjusting forward and backward. You cannot mount this binding with the slots or with these holes going side to side. You need to have them forward and backward. So that's how you're gonna go ahead and center your foot up. But then when you're adjusting it from side to side, a good thing to note is that the triangle here on the inside, if you wanna move the binding out just a little bit, you'll notice that if you slide this all the way to the side without doing anything, kind of like how they do the 4x4, you notice that we just move the binding a long ways. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on these 2 outer holes, and we're gonna spin the disc around 180 degrees on those same 2 holes, but now we have a hole on the inside. So this is how we get some adjustment from side to side. So as you go side to side and you're moving your bindings out, you're gonna spin the disc around 180 degrees each time you move the binding out. So that's how you're gonna go ahead and get those adjustments side to side without having to go way too far and find yourself in a stance that's just way too big. But again, once we've got that all set, you drop your screws in, you get each one started, you go ahead and tighten them down, and then you are 100% ready to ride. But if you got any questions about anything that we talked about in this video, definitely leave some comments down below. We're on there every single day trying to answer those questions. We wanna make sure we can get you into some rad gear, but most importantly, we wanna make sure that you're gonna be able to get it mounted up so you can use it properly as well. Also make sure to like, subscribe, and definitely get that notification bell on too so you can find out when all the new videos drop. And head on over to peterglenn.com, grab yourself a new set of bindings, get them mounted up on your old classic board, and get out and ride. Because any day of riding is a good day of riding.